Hi boys and girls, hey, this is Mr. Chalfant, and we are working on finishing our last couple of chapters of the miraculous journey of Edward Tulane. And I actually have a surprise for you. We are going to finish the story today. There's only 3 chapters left, plus a little part at the very end called the afterword. And I just decided I wanted to finish the story today. Plus, I have another story I'm going to send you tomorrow just to listen to. I won't be reading it out loud, but I'm going to send you a video read aloud of a book that's a very famous book, and it's kind of got a little bit of a text-to-text connection. I think you're going to really like it tomorrow. So that'll be fun, and you can have the whole weekend to listen to it before we start our next book on next Monday. So we're going to finish that. I will show you the pictures as we go through, because you don't have the pictures in front of you on the screen like we normally do. Also, I've been doing some calculations. I've been trying to figure out how old is Edward right now in the story. And so I went back to the book, and I thought, well, he was with Abilene from when she was 7 until 11 years old. Her 11th birthday was when they went on the ship. So that's 4 years with Abilene. And of course, Abilene was his original owner, right? It was the one who loved him first. He was then on the ocean floor for 297 days. 297 days is almost a full year. It's just about 2 months short of a full year. So it's like 10 months. He was with Nellie and Lawrence. The only thing I could find in that chapter was it said he was with them for a very long time. It didn't actually say the number of days like it does on so many of the others. Maybe I missed it, but I couldn't find it. He was on the trash pile. Remember, their daughter, Lolly, I think was her name, put him out in the trash, and he was in the trash pile for 180 days. That's 6 months buried in the trash pile. He was actually the longest time with Bull and Lucy. Do you remember how long that was? He was there for 7 years with Bull and Lucy. And then he was with Bryce and Sarah Ruth for 6 months. And at the very end of chapter 24, if you remember, he was in the doll maker's shop. The doll mender, the doll maker, had fixed him after he got his head smashed into 21 pieces. And Bryce actually came back to the shop, and the doll maker said, "Nope, we had a deal." And Bryce said, "Can I just see him, please?" And the doll maker brought him down and let Bryce see Edward. And Bryce asked, "Can I hold him?" And the doll maker said, "Nope, you have to say goodbye and then leave and never come back." So Bryce said his goodbye, and the last chapter ends with this. It says, "And Edward was alone." Chapter 25, and here's the picture for chapter 25. You don't see Edward in that picture, but you see all of the other dolls that are there. And here we go. Technically, of course, he was not alone. Lucius Clark's shop was filled with dolls, lady dolls and baby dolls, dolls with eyes that opened and closed, and dolls with painted-on eyes, dolls dressed as queens, and dolls wearing sailor suits. Edward had never cared for dolls. He found them annoying and self-centered, twittery and vain. This opinion was immediately reinforced by his first shelf-mate, a china doll with green glass eyes and red lips and dark brown hair. She was wearing a green satin dress that fell to her knees. "What are you?" she said in a high-pitched voice when Edward was placed on the shelf next to her. "I am a rabbit," said Edward. The doll let out a small squeak. "You're in the wrong place," she said. "This is a shop for dolls, not rabbits." Edward said nothing. "Shoo," said the doll. "I would love to shoo," said Edward, "but it is obvious that I cannot." After a long silence, the doll said, "I hope you don't think that anyone is going to buy you." Again, Edward said nothing. "The people who come in here want dolls, not rabbits. They want baby dolls or elegant dolls, such as myself, dolls with pretty dresses, dolls with eyes that open and close." "I have no interest in being purchased," said Edward. The doll gasped. "You don't want somebody to buy you?" She said, "You don't want to be owned by a little girl who loves you?" Sarah Ruth, Abilene, thought Edward. Their names went through Edward's head like the notes of a sad, sweet song. "I have already been loved," said Edward. "I have been loved by a girl named Abilene. I have been loved by a fisherman." and his wife, and a hobo and his dog. I have been loved by a boy who played the harmonica, and by a girl who died. Don't talk to me about love, he said. I have known love. This impassioned speech shut up Edward's shelf-mate for a considerable amount of time. Well, she said at last, still, my point is that no one is going to buy you. They did not speak to each other again. The doll was sold 2 weeks later to a grandmother who was purchasing her for a grandchild. Yes, she said to Lucius Clark, that one right there, the one with the green dress, she is quite lovely. Yes, said Lucius, she is, isn't she? And he plucked the doll from the shelf. Goodbye and good riddance, thought Edward. The spot next to the rabbit stayed vacant, that means nobody was there, for some time. Day after day, the door to the shop opened and closed, letting in early morning sun or late afternoon light, lifting the hearts of the dolls inside, all of them thinking, when the door swung wide, that this time, the person entering the shop would be the one who wanted them. Edward was the lone contrarian. That means he didn't want to be bought. He prided himself on not hoping, on not allowing his heart to lift inside of him. He prided himself on keeping his heart silent, immobile, that means not moving, closed tight. Boys and girls, I think he's done with leaving and saying goodbye. I am done with hope, thought Edward Tulane. And then one day at dusk, right before he closed the shop, Lucius Clark placed another doll on the shelf next to Edward. And boys and girls, you can see the other doll right here for chapter 26. There you are, milady. Meet the rabbit doll, said Lucius. The doll mender walked away, turning out the lights one by one. In the gloom and dark of the shop, Edward could see that the doll's head, just like his, had been broken and repaired. Her face was in fact a web of cracks. She was wearing a baby bonnet. How do you do? She said in a high, thin voice. I am pleased to make your acquaintance. That means she's happy to meet him. Hello, said Edward. Have you been here long? She asked. Months and months, said Edward, but I don't care. One place is the same as another to me. Oh, not for me, said the baby doll. I have lived 100 years. And in that time I have been in places that were heavenly and others that were horrid. After a time, you learn that each place is different, and you become a different doll in each place too, quite different. Do you remember how Edward's actually been different? He was, of course, Edward, and then with Nellie and Lawrence, he was Susanna, and then with Bull and Lucy, he was Malone, and then with Bryce and Sarah Ruth, remember, he was Jangles. But inside, he still feels like he's Edward. You become a different doll. In each place, too, quite different. 100 years? Said Edward. I am old. The doll mender confirmed this. He said, as he was mending me, that I am at least that. At least 100 years old. Edward thought about everything that had happened to him in his short life. What kind of adventures would you have if you were in the world for a century? Boys and girls, a century is 100 years. The old doll said, I wonder who will come for me this time. Someone will come. Someone always comes. Who will it be? I don't care if anyone comes for me, said Edward. Oh, but that's dreadful, said the old doll. There's no point in going on if you feel that way. No point at all. You must be filled with hope and expectancy. You must be awash In hope, you must wonder who will love you, whom you will love next. I am done with being loved, Edward told her. I'm done with loving. It's too painful. Pish, said the old doll. Where is your courage? Somewhere else, I guess, said Edward. You disappoint me, she said. You disappoint me greatly. If you have no intention of loving or being loved, then the whole journey is pointless. You might as well leap from this shelf right now and let yourself shatter into 1,000,000 pieces. Get it over with. Get it all over with now. I would leap if I was able, said Edward. Shall I push you? Said the old doll. No, thank you, Edward said to her. Not that you could, he muttered to himself. What's that? Nothing, said Edward. The dark in the doll shop was now complete. The old doll and Edward sat on their shelf and stared straight ahead. You disappoint me, said the old doll. Her words made Edward think of Pellegrina, of warthogs and princesses, of listening and love, of spells and curses. What if there was somebody waiting to love him? What if there was somebody whom he would love again? Was it possible? Edward felt his heart stir. No, he told his heart, not possible, not possible. In the morning, Lucius Clark came and unlocked the shop. Good morning, my darlings. He called out to them, good morning, my lovelies. He pulled up the shades on the windows. He turned on the light over his tools. He switched the sign on the door to say, open. The first customer was a little girl with her father. Are you looking for something special? Lucius Clark said to them. Yes, said the girl. I am looking for a friend. Her father put her on his shoulders and they walked slowly around the shop. The girl studied each doll carefully. She looked Edward right in the eyes. She nodded at him. Have you decided, Natalie? Her father asked. Yes, she said. I want the one in the baby bonnet. Oh, said Lucius Clark, you know that she is very old. She is an antique. She needs me, said Natalie firmly. Next to Edward, the old doll let out a sigh. She seemed to sit up straighter. Lucius came and took her off the shelf and handed her to Natalie. And when they left, when the girl's father opened the door for his daughter and the old doll, a bright shaft of early morning light came flooding in, and Edward heard quite clearly, as if she were still sitting next to him, the old doll's voice. Open your heart, she said gently. Someone will come. Someone will come for you, but first you must open your heart. Boys and girls, here's the picture. For that page, there's Edward in his fine new clothes sitting on the shelf. The door closed and the sunlight disappeared. Someone will come. Edward's heart stirred. He thought for the very first time in a long time of the house on Egypt Street and of Abilene winding his watch and then bending toward him and placing it on his left leg, saying, I will come home to you. No, he told himself, don't believe it. Don't let yourself believe it. But it was too late. Someone will come for you. The China rabbit's heart had begun again to open. Boys and girls, this is our last chapter, 27, and somebody is coming in with an umbrella. How many years has it been? Seasons passed. Fall and winter and spring and summer. Leaves blew in through the open door of Lucius Clark's shop. And rain. and the green, outrageous, hopeful light of spring. People came and went, grandmothers and doll collectors and little girls with their mothers. Edward Tulane waited. The seasons turned into years. Edward Tulane waited. He repeated the old doll's words over and over until they wore a smooth groove of hope in his brain. Someone will come. Someone will come for you. And the old doll was right. Someone did come. It was springtime. It was raining. There were dogwood blossoms on the floor of Lucius Clark's shop. She was a small girl, maybe 5 years old, and while her mother struggled to close a blue umbrella, the little girl walked around the store, stopping and staring solemnly, that means very seriously, at each doll and then moving on. When she came to Edward, she stood in front of him for what seemed like a long time. She looked at him, and he looked back at her. "Someone will come," Edward said. "Someone will come for me." The girl smiled, and then she stood on her tiptoes, and she took Edward off the shelf. She cradled him in her arms. She held him in the same ferocious, tender way that Sarah Ruth had held him. "Oh," thought Edward, "I remember this." "Madam," said Lucius Clark, "could you please attend to your daughter? She is holding a very fragile, very precious, quite expensive doll." "Maggie," said the woman. She looked up from the still open umbrella. "What have you got?" "A rabbit," said Maggie. "A what?" said the mother. "A rabbit," said Maggie again. "I want him." "Remember, we're not buying anything today. We're only looking," said the woman. "Madam," said Lucius Clark, "please." The woman came and stood over Maggie. She looked down at Edward. The rabbit felt dizzy. He wondered for a minute if his head had cracked open again, if he was dreaming. "Look, Mama," said Maggie, "look at him." "I see him," said the woman. She dropped the umbrella. She put her hand on the locket that hung around her neck, and Edward saw that it was not a locket at all. It was a watch, a pocket watch. It was his watch. "Edward?" said Abilene. "Yes," said Edward. "Edward," she said again, certain this time. "Yes," said Edward. "Yes, yes, yes, it's me." Boys and girls, that's the end of our story. But there's a little bit more. It's called the Coda. And the Coda means the very last part of the story, like it's the last part of a song. So we'll read this part too. This is the Coda, or the end of the song. "Once there was a China rabbit who was loved by a little girl. The rabbit went on an ocean journey and fell overboard and was rescued by a fisherman. He was buried under garbage and unburied by a dog. He traveled for a long time with the hobos and worked for a short time as a scarecrow. Once there was a rabbit who loved a little girl and watched her die. The rabbit danced on the streets of Memphis. His head was broken open in a diner and was put back together again by a doll mender. And the rabbit swore that he would not make the mistake of ever loving again. Once there was a rabbit who danced in a garden in springtime with the daughter of the woman who had loved him at the beginning of his journey. The girl swung the rabbit as she danced in circles, and sometimes they went so fast, the two of them, that it seemed as if they were flying. Sometimes it seemed as if they both had wings. Once, oh marvelous once, there was a rabbit who found his way home." Boys and girls, who was it that found Edward? Do you know who it was? Boys and girls, it was Abilene. It was Abilene who held his watch and had kept it all those years It was Abilene and her daughter. And remember, Abilene was the one who hugged him so tight. Boys and girls, that's our story, The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, and I hope you really liked it. I've got another great one for you tomorrow, and then we'll start a new chapter book next week.